Hello and welcome to Commodity Champions. I'm Manisha Gupta. Well, the gold price has hit record high yet again in the previous trading session and remained in sight of peak on renewed concerns over US-China trade war. The US President Donald Trump had paused on tariffs against Canada and Mexico, but the same favor was not extended towards China. The Chinese government imposed retaliatory tariffs against the US on some goods and export controls on certain metals. Inflationary concerns also have fueled demand for safe haven buying of the yellow metal. So what's in store for gold next? To discuss this, we are now joined by Sachin Jain. He's Regional CEO for India at World Gold Council. Sachin, hi, good to have you. And to the global cues first, because they really seem to be taking priority right now. We are looking at gold taking support, even as we've seen tariffs push back a bit. How are you reading onto the US tariff turbulence at this point?
First of all, Manisha, thanks for having me on your platform. It's always a pleasure. Well, the world of gold has been quite interesting. You know, coming out of 24, we think the year of gold, the year of 24 has been a year of gold. And it progresses in the same fashion. And all the elements that you just mentioned that have stood behind gold have been the fundamentals. Gold as a safe haven, gold as a liquid asset, gold as a hedge, gold as a diversified portfolio. So all elements have paid out. And if you look at the core pillars on which the gold sort of pans out, the central bank's mind, which is really the strength of the country and the strategic view of any nation, and that has been very interesting last year. That has grown significantly, and move fast forwarding to 2025 will continue as the world becomes slightly the way it is on trade tariffs and so on and so forth. Now, gold as a financial instrument has played up very well last year with almost a 30% plus return, and that has got a lot of interest from the financial markets on gold as a segment, and that will continue in 2025. Jewelry as overall consumption, we've seen globally has been a bit of dip, but India has done very well with, of course, an outstanding Q3 of August, like July, August, September, post the reduction of custom duty. But I think what's happened, particularly on Saturday with the new budget coming out, a budget that's so strong, a budget that sort of almost marches India to a Viksit Bharat 2047 with core pillars of simplicity, core pillars of investment in infrastructure, and other elements that have paid out. We believe that this is going to be a very strong, phase for gold, not just India, but overall. Now, you mentioned about things happening in America and everything. Again, go back. I always talk about this, the core pillars of gold, which is around hedge, around geopolitics that happens and how gold tends to be a stable asset class. So all those fundamentals of gold are panning out.
Sure. Sachin, coming back to budget, and as you mentioned onto that one, we also saw jewelry import duty cut from 25 to 20%. How is that going to impact Indian buying and overall market?
Well, I think the Indian market is quite sort of well segmented, and there is a lot of consumption that is led from a high-end luxury sort of consumer. And I think a reduction of gold import duty is a good thing. It'll only amplify consumers' interest who perhaps are buying overseas for certain brands will buy here. But I think it also, what's really done is that when we talk about the per capita income of an Indian on the street, a regular Indian, and how that's going to change with the changes in the income tax and other elements, we've seen as historically that every 1% increase in the sheer money in the hands of people, the sheer disposable income, it leads to about 1% increase in demand of gold. So we believe that as the Indians or Indians at mass will have more disposable income, it'll have an impact positively on the gold consumption. What you mentioned around the import duty on gold as jewelry, that's gone down a little, but I think it's only a positive. I think it only amplify the Indian creativity to be, there'll be a bit of competition, which is a good thing. And also I think it'll make us work better as Indian manufacturing and Indian creativity to almost, appeal to a global consumer as well.
Sachin, the other thing clearly was about India creating different tariff lines with more HSN codes. Now, we do understand that this would plug perhaps the revenue loss that the government was having, and it would make it easier to understand what kind of gold we are importing.
Well, actually, I think if you go back to the four sort of pillars of Viksit Bharat, one of them, of course, is infrastructure, the other is manufacturing, then it's about skill development. There's a lot of talk in the budget around skill development. But the fourth, I think, is what you're alluding towards, is simplicity. And simplicity with, of course, bigger steps. So when we saw the respectable finance minister give out the budget in July, it was a very big step for the gold business, where not just make it simple, but also, almost erasing the whole parallel gray market that used to exist. But I think now with all the different elements that you mentioned, operating in India as a business, an ethical business, will get more simpler. And I think it's only positive for the overall industry to operate more transparently. We've always had seen as gold industry, being a slightly opaque business. But if you look at how many industry players and people in the gold business have gone in the mainstream, to list their companies or stock markets and so on and so forth, it's only an amplified view that we can operate more transparently. And you rightly said that this one change has plugged this loophole that existed.
Clearly. Sachin, I understand, the previous conversations that we've had as well, you've said this many a times that 2024 was a phenomenal year, not just in sense of the gold price return, but also the number of IPOs that Indian market came out with from the jewelry sector and the kind of transparency that India continued to show there. 2025, what is your sense? Because you're just working with so many things with ministries on a global level as well. What are we looking forward to gold as a financial asset or a sector for 2025?
I think gold 2025 will be again a strong year because the core pillars on which gold is standing on, and I mentioned about the geopolitics, the hedge, all of the core fundamentals are strong. But I think the big steps that the Indian industry and the government took a few years ago, elements like mandatory hallmarking, which now we're seeing impacts on the floor, where consumers' trust in gold is high and will get better. We're also initiating, newer sort of projects like the SRO, the first one in the gold value chain, and a lot of such impetuses where transparency, confidence are the core structural changes that the industry is working on. Sure. And I'm super confident that a consumer on the street, whether it's a rural consumer or an urban consumer, their confidence on how gold gets to them is more contemporary, it's more transparent, it's more systematic. You can get on the app and see what's happening to your gold. And all of these things will amplify the consumption because the core element of what gold brings in is the trust, and that will get amplified.
Fair point. I do understand that World Gold Council, and Sachin, you don't talk about the gold prices, but I mean, look at the prices, all-time highs in the US dollar terms, in euro, in Chinese yuan, in the Indian rupee as well. Is direction on the higher side from here?
Well, I think from our perspective, we always say that look at gold from a long-term perspective, and the fundamentals of gold have always been, always stayed truth, particularly in 2024, where we've seen gold as a hedge, as I said, gold as a liquid asset, all those elements have stood forth, and they will continue to do so in 2025. Now, whether the market is going to go up crazily high or no, at World Gold Council, we don't indicate that. But we believe it's going to be a strong year. It's going to be stable to perhaps a slightly positive year as you go forward.
Sachin, as always, thank you so much for joining and a pleasure talking to you. So, well, there's various stuff that is happening in case of gold. Budget has been positive as well. More money coming to people would always mean buying more gold. And we have seen that happen all the time in India. But with that, it's time for a short break. But coming up, government pushes for self-reliance in pulses and improving production of makhanas. We will decode the impact with experts on the other side.